Hey, everybody. It is Monday, April 29th. You're listening to the Mo.news podcast. I'm mo.news.
And I'm Jill Wagner. This is the place where we bring you just the facts.
She's back, everybody. We read all the news and we read between the lines so you don't have to. Jill, how was your week?
I wouldn't call it a vacation, right? It's with two young kids. But we had a good trip. We're actually still in Florida, but I am back at work. And so it's been great. It's wonderful to have the family time, to have a little bit of time off work. Thank you for holding down the fort.
Of course. It was a busy news week last week. We missed you, but I hope I was able to hold my own, keep everyone informed, Jill. And I think it's always good as a journalist to take a break from the news for a few days for a little perspective, as opposed to, as we typically have to do, constantly immerse ourselves with every single story every single day.
Yeah, and see what people are talking about, see what's resonating amongst the people. I also
the Floridians that you've been hanging out with. Yes.
Hey, this has the potential to be a swing state. I did listen to the podcast, though, and yada, yada, yada. I appreciate the Seinfeld reference that you put in. I believe it was Wednesday.
Yeah, Jill, it's sad. It's sad, especially when there are stories where I'm like, I know Jill would have something to say about this, and doing it and then, having no one to speak to. And like pretending to react by myself. But alas, you are back. And there's a lot of headlines coming out this weekend.
All right, so let's get to it. A couple hundred more arrests on college campuses this weekend as anti-Israel protests and takeovers of a building force one university to close down until the fall. 2024 presidential news is we're now about 6 months from the election. Donald Trump and RFK Jr. are now in a back and forth. Some new details on the Trump vice president selection process. Harvey Weinstein now in the hospital after news that his rape conviction was overturned last week.
And we'll also have an update for those of you asking about what the overturn in New York means for his conviction in California.
And a recap of the best jokes from the White House Correspondents' dinner over the weekend featuring Colin, Jost, and Joe Biden. Moshe, the president's got jokes.
He's got joke writers, Jill, and he delivered a few. But yeah, typically on SNL, it's Colin, Jost, and Michael Shea. This weekend, it was Colin, Jost, and Joe Biden at the Correspondents' dinner. So we'll have some of the hits and some of the misses.
The push in Australia to better protect women after several high-profile killings this year. We're learning more about the morning routine of one of the richest people in the world, Amazon founder Jeff Bezos, and it might surprise you.
It might make you feel better about your morning routine and the potential for you, too, to become a billionaire.
One of the most followed people on Instagram talks about the importance of quitting the app for a while and what it did for her. The Mona Lisa is set to get a new home. And Moshe has On This Day in History.
Jill, your favorite segment, and in honor of your return, a little Bruce Springsteen history for you on this day.
All right, let's start back on campus as more than 200 protesters were arrested this weekend across the country as colleges struggle to quell growing pro-Palestinian and anti-Israel demonstrations and encampments on campuses that have devolved at times into violence and anti-Semitic rhetoric. At least one university has now canceled in-person classes through the fall because of buildings being occupied and taken over by protesters. On Saturday alone, several hundred demonstrators, some students, some non-students, who made their way to campuses were arrested at Northeastern University in Boston, Arizona State University, Indiana University, and Washington University in St. Louis. More than 700 protesters have been arrested on U.S. campuses since April 18th, when Columbia University had the NYPD clear a protest encampment there. In several cases, most of those who were arrested have been released. Columbia is the epicenter, and the arrests there really touched off these copycat encampments and protests at dozens of campuses across the country. At WashU, more than 80 arrests were made, and the campus was locked down on Saturday evening. Jill Stein, who is the Green Party presidential candidate, that's a third party, she was among those arrested, along with her campaign manager and another staff member. Earlier in the day at Northeastern in Boston, protesters had set up an encampment on the campus's Centennial Common this week. It drew more than 100 supporters. The administration had asked the protesters to leave, but many students did not. A spokesperson for the university said the demonstration had been, quote, infiltrated by professional organizers, and that the, quote, use of virulent anti-Semitic slurs, including kill the Jews, crossed the line. So there was a video that showed that some of the pro-Israel demonstrators had used the line, kill the Jews, as the rhetoric heated up. But the university insists that there was anti-Semitism coming from the anti-Israel side, and the tent encampments were violating university policies. Things escalated further in California at California State Polytechnic University in Humboldt. That's in far northern California. And that is where they have now closed campus and canceled class and events for the rest of the semester until the fall. Protesters have now occupied 2 administration buildings, destroying offices, graffitiing walls with Palestinian slogans, and defacing some classrooms. The university there has been negotiating with protesters. And Moshe, basically what we're seeing is just a variety of different strategies from universities.
Yeah, as you mentioned, Jill, this really got lit up about 10 days ago at Columbia University, the use of the NYPD and the return of the students that inspired more of these protests now at more than 50 campuses across the country, and different colleges, different universities, public and private, all taking different tactics here. You had UT Austin in Texas, Arizona State, quickly moving in on arrest, saying they're violating university policy. We allow protest and free speech, but not these tent encampments. They violate a variety of school rules. If you don't go pretty quickly, we're going to arrest you. And they've stood by that. Then you had other schools who tried arrests, USC in LA, Columbia University, Yale, Indiana, others. But then you had the students, after that first round of arrests, return to the university campuses, set up tent encampments again, and in some cases, at some of those schools, have very sympathetic faculty joining them, so professors now joining them. And so the school's now reluctant to do a second round of arrests. So they sort of did the first round, told them not to do it. The students called their bluff, and so those are those schools. And then you have other schools that are setting deadlines and then not following through with them. And like my alma mater, George Washington University in D.C., which told the encampment, you have until X time on Friday night to end your encampment. And then once that time passed, the university did nothing and the camp is still there. Then you have other schools that are, again, somewhere in between. They're negotiating with the student protesters over their demands. In many cases, these student protesters are calling for universities to end all of their study abroad programs and relationships with the country of Israel, any Israeli hospitals, any Israeli businesses, also calling for transparency and an end to investment in companies. Remember, universities have endowments, so they're calling on the university to say, we want to know what companies you invest in. And if any of those companies do anything remotely with Israel, we want you to divest from them. So this is Google, this is Amazon, this is Apple. Remember, Israel's a huge tech hub in the Middle East, and some of the most lucrative stocks, some of the stocks that have done the best in recent years, are those companies. So in many cases, in almost all cases here, the university is saying, we're not going to give authority over our investment strategy to a bunch of undergraduate protesters. Then, of course, you have the most extreme example that we've seen over the weekend, Jill. You noted it, Cal State Polytechnic up there in Humboldt, where the students are literally occupying administration buildings, graffitiing, destroying property, and university is negotiating with them and doesn't quite know what to do, forcing the cancellation of in-person classes for the rest of the semester. Keep in mind, on most of these campuses, while they're getting a lot of attention, these campuses have thousands, tens of thousands, in some cases more than 100,000 students. Most of these protests number in the dozens or a couple hundred, but they're certainly getting a lot of attention. University of Washington out there in the Northwest actually postponed their encampment because student organizers couldn't find a single Muslim, Arab, or Palestinian student to join the encampment. So the protesters felt, based on the lack of diversity, that they shouldn't do an encampment, and so they're looking for that. Jill, Jill, a lot of threads here at Columbia University. One of the student leaders who's been out there in front negotiating with the university, his name is Kaimani Jones, got a lot of attention late last week when it was revealed on his Instagram account. He had a video up there saying that people should be thankful he's not going around murdering Jews who believe in Israel, murdering Zionists. He compared Zionists to Nazis and white supremacists, saying all Zionists must die. Jill, we should note that if you ask Jews, you take polls among Jews, 90 to 95% of Jews would say they are Zionists. And so I think we should take a quick moment here on the nomenclature front. I know it's something you mentioned on your Instagram feed over the weekend, to just define for folks who are hearing the word Zionism how one defines it.
Yeah, after that video surfaced of that student that you mentioned, I was curious myself to see if people even knew what a Zionist is. So I asked on my Instagram account, and a lot of people did, but a lot of people didn't. Zionism is simply this idea that Jews have a right to self-determination and a state in their indigenous land, and that Israel has a right to exist. So that is the textbook definition. If you ask most Jews, that's what they would say that they believe Zionism is. There are critics or people who say they're against Zionism. They think that it means that there could be no Palestine or that all Palestinians must die. When the truth is, Zionism was actually intended to mean a state alongside the Arab countries. So a Jewish state and a Palestinian state. The vast majority of Zionists would say that. And in fact, back in 1947, when the UN partitioned the British Mandate into a Jewish state and an Arab state, the quote unquote Zionists said, great, we'll take it, and declared their independence of a state of Israel that in their mind was going to be next to a Palestinian state or an Arab state. And it was actually the Arabs who rejected it. Now, this isn't for us to opine on Middle Eastern politics here, but as you're saying, definitions do matter, especially when the chants are about killing Zionists. And it's like, well, what does that mean? Or I have nothing against Jews, but I'm against Zionists. Well, it's like, well, do you even know what a Zionist is?
Right. It's important here, as we're talking about an incredibly complex conflict, to ensure that words do matter, whether you're talking about Zionism, whether you're using terms like genocide or ethnic cleansing, etc. Words have definition in war and in peace. And so we should note that when it comes to Zionism, for many Jews, denying the rights of Jews to have self-determination in their own country is commensurate with telling Spanish people there can be no Spain, or Japanese people there can be no Japan, or et cetera, et cetera. That ultimately they have a right to self-determination like every other people in the world. Now, at the same time, there are certainly right-wing extremists, Israelis, a minority who believe that the entire thing should be Israel, and so the greater Zionism. But for the purposes of just defining things, Zionism, again, the belief that Israel should exist. And so as you listen to the rhetoric, as you listen to the comments, keep in mind that sometimes you need to ask people what they think things are when you find out what their opinions are, because sometimes they're working off of a different definition. And one of the issues, I would say, Jill, as we've been watching these protests, is there are certainly well-intentioned participants here. People who sympathize with the Palestinians in Gaza, people who are calling out legitimate criticism of the war, the humanitarian needs. The issue that I think we've seen unfold on a number of these campuses is the leaders of these movements, in some cases students, in some cases outside organizations, including organizations like the Students for Justice in Palestine, who have taken ultra-extremist stances here, calling for the destruction of Israel, the deportation of Jews from Israel. There was a sign at George Washington University saying that all Jews need to leave Israel and go back to their original countries, which is everything from Iran, Iraq, Morocco. I mean, Jews are from all over the world. And what's interesting, Jill, is there's been a number of critics from even the Palestinian movement in the West Bank, in Gaza, in Israel, who have said that these campus extremists have sort of lost the plot here, in some cases taking more extreme positions that you see more extreme positions being taken on Northwestern University's campus or Columbia University's campus versus in Ramallah, where the Palestinian Authority accepted the right of Israel to exist in the early 90s and believes in an eventual two-state solution here. So in some cases, they're saying, hey, guys, you guys are reverting to positions that failed us back in the 60s and 70s. We've accepted the state of Israel. We just, want to fight the occupation and have a state to ourselves. And in some cases, you've seen arguments from some folks that they're actually hurting the cause, that these campus protests are distracting, hurting the overall cause. And it's easy to take these extreme positions on the in Manhattan when you have no stake in the game and you can say these extreme things.
And quickly, one thing that you had pointed out over on the Instagram account is that you are talking now about seniors anyway who began their college career during COVID when a lot of classes were remote. And now graduation ceremonies are being canceled. And so it is quite disruptive just to student life. So if you're just a student who kind of doesn't care either way, who just wants to finish off your degree, go to class, go to the bar, have a few drinks, hang out with your friends, this is quite disruptive. And the protesters would say, well, and the protesters, of course, would say, well, there are things that are more important than that and whatnot. But you are talking about a very serious disruption to campus life. The fact that schools are just simply shutting down in some cases until the fall.
Yeah, I mean, that humbled example, pretty extreme. At the same time, right, campuses are places for free speech, for protest movements. We've seen it through the centuries, really. And ultimately, again, the best of intentions, the question is, what are the overall goals here? And are some of the more extreme positions being taken here fulfilling those goals, neutral to the goals, or actually going back on those goals? And so, ultimately, those are the questions being asked. And I think everyone here in the country believes in free speech. The question is, ultimately, when does free speech become hate speech? And ultimately, what are the goals of the movement here? And we could look back at other recent movements, whether it's Occupy Wall Street, whether it was the protests against the wars in Iraq, etc., whether it's BLM and the aftermath there, the Me Too protests, a lot of recent movements in recent years, and look at some of the lessons learned there in terms of what goals were accomplished. At times, were more extreme groups or extreme leaders, did they end up helping? Again, neutral, helping, or actually reversing some situations. So it's something we're going to watch here, and we're watching a wide diversity of opinions, goals here. Again, many well-intentioned, some not so much. But a lot of universities a conundrum here, Jill, as to what to do next and how long this is going to last.
All right, now to 2024 politics. We've been telling you about the Democratic concerns about an RFK Jr. presidential run and potentially that taking some key votes away from President Biden. Well, this weekend, it was Donald Trump that was going after RFK Jr., as some new polls show that he might be taking away a number of voters from the Republican side. On Friday night, Trump venting on his Truth Social platform that the Independent was dropped into the field to actually aid Biden's chances of reelection.
Jill, a new theory here from Trump that RFK Jr. is all part of a Democratic Joe Biden plot.
Trump writing on Truth Social, RFK Jr. is a Democrat plant. A vote for Jr. would essentially be a wasted protest vote that could swing either way, but would only swing against Democrats if Republicans knew the true story about him. Trump even said that he would take Biden over, quote, Junior, as he's now referring to him as president.
Yeah, right. He doesn't want to go with the Kennedy. He's going to just call him Junior moving forward.
Though he does say both would lead to the destruction of America. Over the weekend, Kennedy dismissed Trump as unhinged in his response. He wrote on Twitter, or X, when frightened men take to social media, they risk descending into vitriol, which makes them sound unhinged. President Trump's rant against me is a barely coherent barrage of wild and inaccurate claims that should best be resolved in the American tradition of presidential debate. So Kennedy's getting about 8 to 10% in recent polls to qualify for a fall debate. If they happened, he would need to meet a 15% threshold. His other challenge, of course, is getting on the ballot. As an independent, he needs to get signatures and follow different rules in all 50 states. Right now, it looks like he can get on about 7 7 or 8 ballots for states, but he's working towards getting on all 50 state ballots, although the deadlines are approaching pretty quickly. His policy platforms vary across the board. Kennedy, formerly an environmental lawyer, stands firmly to Biden's left on some environmental policies, like calling for a permanent ban on natural gas export. Kennedy's green policies, as well as his historically Democratic aligned last name, have made him a perceived threat to Biden's ability to consolidate the party's vote in the 2024 election. At the same time, his criticism of vaccines, as well as being a huge advocate for free speech on social media, have led people on the right to warm up to him.
Right. So we saw all these polls earlier this year that he's taking more votes from Biden than Trump. Now we've seen a couple polls showing he's taking slightly more votes from Trump than Biden, which explains why Trump on Friday night decided to unleash on RFK Jr. after months where Trump, Giuliani, other allies have said, we love RFK in this race because he's going to take votes away from Biden. He now sees Kennedy as a potential threat here, so he's attacking him. He's trying to showcase his left-leaning policies for the most part on most issues to a group of Trump supporters who sort of are intrigued about his position on vaccines, free speech, and a couple other issues.
Also want to mention RFK Jr., very pro-Israel. He has actually called the Palestinians the most, quote, pampered people in the world. So that's another one of his positions where you're kind of like, who does that play to? Right. Does that play to the Democrats? Right. Does that play to the Republicans?
He's super environmental. He doesn't want foreign wars. He's super pro-Israel. He hates vaccines. And he's like with Elon Musk and Trump, et cetera, on free speech on social media and critical of the tech companies. So an interesting mix of policy positions for RFK Jr. in a year where the two main candidates are extremely unpopular and people are thinking about a third-party candidate. And Jill, remember, 2020, close votes, right? Georgia, the separation with 2 million votes in the state between Trump and Biden was 11,000 votes. In Arizona, it was 10,000 votes. So votes for an RFK Jr. could make a huge difference. And so when we talk about who he's taking more votes from, it could be really impactful here. And so far, the Dems have been really concerned because they look back at 2016, Hillary's loss. They saw a couple percent go to the third-party candidates like Jill Stein and others. And so they don't want that repeat. In 2020, it was basically just Biden and Trump. Now they see the third-party candidates, and they're having a freak-out sort of 2016. Well, Trump's sort of freaking out now, too, this weekend. So you saw that whole back and forth. You mentioned that RFK is saying, debate me, Donald Trump. As we talk about debates, we got some news on that front on Friday. Joe Biden still not doing interviews with the New York Times of the world, but who did he do an interview with last week? Howard Stern. So of the news that he made during the Howard Stern interview, he told Howard, yeah, I'll debate Donald Trump, which was news because until now, the White House, Joe Biden has said, I'm not sure I'm going to debate Donald Trump. It depends on his behavior because he was so interrupting in 2020. So now it appears he's made a vow to debate Trump. Trump responding very quickly on Friday saying, bring it on. Actually, can we debate this week? You know, he desperately wants to debate Joe Biden. It looks like very, very soon. Now, the traditional debates will happen in the fall. There's typically 3 of them. They're run by an independent commission. And so we'll see where that conversation lies. The first debate scheduled for about 5 months from now.
And one more 2024 note, Axios is reporting that we are getting at least some clarity when it comes to Trump's VP search.
Yeah, the Apprentice VP edition, part 2 here. Trump probably has about 24 people. He's considering a variety of things. He's considering a variety of factors here. We've talked about it on the podcast before. And the reporting is, Jill, that more and more he thinks the VP should be Doug Burgum. You might remember his name. He's the governor of North Dakota. He had a long shot presidential bid. In fact, he actually gave out $20 gift cards to try to get into the early debates there. He failed. He's pretty soft-spoken, deferential. Trump is liking that as a VP. See, he's liking that for VP, Jill, someone who's loyal, someone who's relatively quiet, someone who does not take over the stage from him. Apparently, he and Melania had an Easter brunch at Mar-a-Lago with Doug Burgum and his wife. He thinks Doug Burgum can help him reach out to moderates. And it does come, Jill, as we talk about Dakota governors, the governor of South Dakota, Kristi Noem, who was highly talked about as a potential Trump VP. It's looking less and less likely that she's going to be VP, Jill. I don't know if you saw these revelations while you were on vacation, but she has a new autobiography coming out where she talks about Her treatment of animals. Her treatment of animals, including putting down a dog. And I should warn you folks, if you have a pet or a dog or kids who don't want to hear something bad about a dog, please fast forward about 90 seconds here, because I'm about to tell you what Kristi Noem revealed in her book. Pause. All right, Jill, as Joe Biden said last week at an event, I'm going to say pause, literally pause. Fast forward. Okay, so Kristi Noem, the governor of South Dakota, has a new autobiography out where she talks about killing her 14-month-old dog. She writes in her new book, which, by the way, is called No Going Back. It's her autobiography. Many people, as they're looking to go more nationally, write an autobiography. And she's particularly revealing in this book about what happened with her and this dog that she owned. She writes, quote, "We love animals, but tough decisions like this happen all the time on a farm." She said that her dog was, quote, "less than worthless and untrainable." So she led her dog, whose name was Cricket, to a gravel pit and shot and killed the dog, a 14-month-old dog. She writes in the book, "It was not a pleasant job, but it had to be done. And after it was over, I realized that I had another unpleasant job that needed to be done." Apparently, they also had a family goat. She describes the goat in the book as, quote, "nasty and mean." So she also took the goat to the gravel pit and apparently killed the goat, the family goat as well, Jill, which if we can take a couple lessons away from this, I don't know that that's good for politics, given how people feel about pets. And lesson in life, if you're in South Dakota, avoid Kristi Noem's gravel pit.
And a lesson if you're writing a book, get an editor who's going to say, maybe take that part out. You're
writing this book about yourself and you want a national political future. Maybe we avoid the whole "I had a nasty, untrainable dog that I decided to kill in a gravel pit." One of the rare moments, Jill, where we're going to opine here beyond just the facts. Just saying.
All right, time now for the speed read. This one from NPR. Harvey Weinstein's lawyer said this weekend that the one-time movie mogul has been hospitalized for a battery of tests after his return to New York City following an appeals court ruling that nullified his 2020 rape conviction. His attorney said that the 72-year-old Weinstein was moved to Bellevue Hospital in Manhattan after his arrival on Friday to city jails. His lawyer saying it seems like he needs a lot of help physically. He's got a lot of problems. He's getting all kinds of tests. He's somewhat of a train wreck health-wise. You might remember that he used a walker already during his trials over the last few years. He is set to be moved to a prison in California in the near term after his New York conviction was overturned, and he will face a new trial. He was convicted in a separate rape case in California, where he has a 16-year sentence awaiting him.
Right. So the New York case overturned, new trial likely in New York the next couple of years here. In the meantime, not a free man. He's got to go serve the California sentence, which was set to be served after the 20-year plus New York sentence. And by the way, as you note, he's not in good health and he's 72 years old. So many people were asking, well, based on what happened in New York, could that happen in California? Well, the thing is, the laws are different in the two states. As we looked further into this, now, Weinstein's attorneys are going to be appealing in California based on the same issue. In New York, they overturned the case because they included witnesses who testified who were not tied to those specific criminal charges. The case in New York was related to 2 women. They allowed 3 additional women with separate accusations that had never been adjudicated to testify as sort of to give you a past, a history, a pattern. The law is different in the two states. In New York, they do not look kindly upon witnesses who bring up other cases that haven't been adjudicated. In California, they're much more lenient on that. They say that based on California law, that bringing in other witnesses does show a defendant's propensity to, in this case, commit sexual assault. So right now, it appears, based on legal observers, that the California conviction is probably more secure than the New York conviction, again, based on historically how the two states have interpreted using outside witnesses.
All right, back to Washington now with Politico's recap of the White House Correspondents' Weekend, the annual White House Correspondents' Dinner, which typically features the president, politicians, journalists, and in recent decades, a slew of celebrities, took place Saturday night in D.C. Weekend Update host and SNL writer Colin Jost was the main comedy act, poking fun mainly at Donald Trump, but also taking some shots at Joe Biden, who was sitting about 10 feet away. President Biden also delivering some jokes along with some serious remarks. Some background here. Since 1921, the White House Correspondents Association has held the dinner celebrating the free press by bringing together more than 2,000 journalists and politicians for a night of friendly jabs, all to raise money for scholarships. Though in recent years, it has increasingly become a mecca for celeb hobnobbing with politicians and journalists.
Yeah, Jill, I was able to get a selfie with George Clooney a few years ago.
Of course you were.
Yeah.
Okay. Let's play, though, a couple of Jost's jokes for everybody. He started with a couple poking fun at Biden's age and competency.
I hope that tonight will be a night to remember for most of us. I was excited to be up here on stage with President Biden tonight, mostly to see if I could figure out where Obama was pulling the strings from. I have to admit, it's not easy following President Biden. I mean, it's not always easy following what he's saying, like...
Jill, you can hear the silence there. Given where the room was, he was having a tough time with the anti-Biden jokes and quickly makes a pivot.
Like many of you here tonight, I pretend to do news on TV.
Moshe, that was funny.
Yeah, Jill, some years the comedians, though, really go to town on the media. And Colin Jost, despite on Weekend Update, hitting the media and honestly hitting Biden pretty well, in the room, he, sort of spent most of his time going after the one person who was not in the room, which was Trump. So I have to say I was a little disappointed. I was hoping that he would jab the president and especially jab the media, which there's no shortage of reasons to critique them. But again, he mainly goes after Trump.
The Republican candidate for president owes $500 million in fines for bank fraud and is currently spending his days farting himself awake during a porn star hush money trial, and the race is tied?
Jill, that was just a couple of them. Jost really hitting former President Trump hard, talking about him again, farting in the courtroom, his various views. And so that was the Colin Jost set. Though he did at one point poke fun at it himself, he goes to Doug Emhoff, the husband of Kamala Harris, and he's like, I know what it's like, by the way, being the second gentleman, referencing the fact that he's referencing, of course, the fact that he's Mr. Scarlett Johansson.
Moshe, it is definitely something that many people know him for. Because if you don't watch SNL, that's kind of what you know him for.
There you go. You definitely know Scarlett Johansson. You may know Colin Jost. Of course, it was then Biden's turn. Typically, presidents, save for Donald Trump, who didn't attend this dinner for 4 years, will do their own performance. I watched it with George W. Bush, with Barack Obama, with Joe Biden. So it was Biden's turn this year to do some comedy. They brought in some comedy writers. Apparently, former DreamWorks exec Jeffrey Katzenberg was involved in the conceptualization and the comedy act as they wrote it in recent weeks. So Biden here poking fun at himself and then going after Trump.
It's been a year since I delivered this speech, and my wife Jill, who's with me tonight, was worried how I do. I told her, don't worry, just like riding a bike. She said, that's what I'm worried about. Of course, the 2024 election is in full swing. And yes, age is an issue. I'm a grown man running against a 6-year-old.
So there you go, Jill, referring to Trump as a 6-year-old. He also said that he's happy to have his vice president's endorsement, unlike Trump. Of course, referencing the fact that Mike Pence doesn't even support Trump anymore. Though then Biden got serious, less jokes this year, and he tried to thread this needle here where he says, I don't want you in the room, the media in the room, to take sides, but there are some serious issues with what Trump has been saying lately, talking about being a dictator for one day. He's making the case that democracy is at stake, and he was essentially calling on the media in the room, which, by the way, included most network presidents, executives who all attend this dinner, saying, don't normalize Trump. So that was the end of Biden's remarks, and also praising journalists, saying, I don't call you fake news, etc. And we should note that's what happened inside the room. Outside the room, there were several hundred protesters, anti-Israel and pro-Palestinian protesters gathered, who were chanting as the attendees entered. So journalists, celebs, politicians entering. The protesters were yelling, "Shame on you, free Palestine," yelling at them for going to the dinner, saying they should be boycotting the dinner. At one point, they got to the top floor of the hotel, the Washington Hilton, where this dinner was being held, unfurled a huge Palestinian flag over the hotel. At one point, there was a confrontation with Caitlyn Jenner, who happened to be attending the dinner this year, who was yelling back at them, giving them the finger. So there was a lot of theater happening outside the hotel as well.
I saw that video on Instagram. I was like, what is happening?
Who wants his attention more, Caitlyn Jenner or the protesters? Because you saw Caitlyn Jenner also taking video on her phone.
All right, from the BBC, rallies have taken place across Australia in response to a wave of recent violence against women. Demonstrators want gender-based violence to be declared a national emergency and stricter laws put in place to stop it. The Prime Minister said the issue was a national crisis. In Australia, a woman has been killed on average every 4 days so far this year. Speaking at a march in the capital of Canberra, attended by thousands of protesters, the Prime Minister, Anthony Albanese, admitted that the government at all levels needed to do better. He says we need to change culture, the attitudes, the legal system, and the approach by all governments. We need to make sure that this isn't up to women. It is up to men to change men's behavior as well.
Yeah, there have been a few killings recently that have put the issue of violence against women in the spotlight down under. Earlier this month, we told you about this. The man who stabbed 6 people to death in his Sydney shopping mall. 5 of the 6 victims were women, and police say that based on the evidence, it appears he was literally looking for women and avoiding men as he was stabbing people. The rallies in recent days also coincide with the charging of a man with the alleged murder of a 30-year-old mother of 4 who was found dead after a house fire earlier this month. In all, 27 women have been killed in the first couple months here in Australia of 2024. And so they're taking it very seriously down there. Jill, it had me actually looking at the numbers here of the situation here in the U.S. Now, the U.S. does have 14 times the population of Australia. But when you look at the death per capita, the killing per capita of women, while we have 14 times the population, we see 50 times the number of women killed a day. In the U.S., 12 women are killed a day. 3 of them a day are killed by an intimate partner following domestic violence. So a serious issue around the world, and in Australia right now, something that's leading to marches.
From the Lex Fridman podcast, one of the 3 richest men in the world says he's not as productive as you may think in the morning. Jeff Bezos may be the executive chairman of Amazon, owner of the space startup Blue Origin, and a billionaire investor, but he tells the Lex Fridman podcast that he has a slow-moving morning routine. The 60-year-old kicks off every day like a lot of people do, dragging his feet and scrolling on his smartphone. Bezos telling the host, "I'm not as productive as you might think I am." This is an episode first released a couple of months ago. He says, "First of all, I get up in the morning and I putter. I have a coffee and just slowly move around." The morning routine coincides with his larger philosophy to embrace wandering or doing things aimlessly. It is a tenet that follows him to the office, where he said he encourages mind-wandering sessions to brainstorm and dissect new ideas without letting time constraints stifle creativity. I am curious, Moshe, if this was always his routine, or it's his routine now that he is a billionaire and not actually running Amazon day to day.
Right. Now that he's worth almost $200 billion and has nothing to worry about. I don't know, Jill, it makes me feel slightly better about doom scrolling every morning and doom scrolling. Like I was like, oh, Jeff Bezos, just like us. This is like the only thing we share in common with him. It's funny. You often think, with these highly, rich, productive people, they're waking up at 4:30 a.m. and doing all this stuff. Well, it turns out apparently he's not alone here. Mark Cuban, also a billionaire, says he wakes up just around 7 a.m. each morning, also checks his emails for about an hour before getting out of bed. He said that on Trevor Noah's podcast earlier this year. Then Cuban says he eats breakfast, works out, checks his email again, rinse and repeat. He says, again, Jill, Cuban super, super rich now. So again, was this the routine before they got super rich or just now. Though it turns out, Jill, I learned from this article that there's something called the World Institute of Slowness. There's actually a head of the World Institute of Slowness, and they've done research into this, though I wonder if it's biased based on the name of the institute. They say slow morning routines can seem lazy and sluggish, but they can actually result in increased energy, creativity, and focus. Thank you, Institute of Slowness. They recommend spending at least 20 minutes every morning doing nothing. Simply stay awake in bed after your alarm goes off. You could meditate, but just do nothing. Start slow, if you can. Say that to all the parents of young kids in the world.
Yeah, Moshe, I was going to say the same thing. Try telling that to anybody who has young kids. Oh, just get up at a leisurely pace, check your emails, do your thing. Putter,
goals
in the words of
when,
Jeff Bezos.
Goals for when your kids are in college, Jill.
From CNBC, Moshe, I wonder what you think of this one. Selena Gomez says that personally getting off Instagram is the best thing that she's ever done for herself. The actor, singer, and entrepreneur is the most followed woman on the platform. She has 429 million users following her account. At a recent appearance at the 2024 Time 100 Summit, the 31-year-old saying that taking an extended break from Instagram was helpful for her mental health. She told a panel she took 4 years off of Instagram and let her team post for her. She said, I felt like it was the most rewarding gift I gave myself. I was more present. I was happier. Gomez said it was great to hear friends tell her about their days over the phone rather than seeing what they posted on their stories.
Yeah, remember, she's the most followed woman in the world. I think the third most followed celebrity on Instagram. She says that it's more human. She feels more human now, and it's important to take breaks. Of course, she's also lucky enough to have her own team posting content while she took that break. At the same time, I feel like this makes sense. You need to, de-entangle yourself from social media when you can. She did return to social media. She was having issues with trolls, especially in regards to her relationship with Benny Blanco. A lot of Justin Bieber fans, her ex-boyfriend, coming out, criticizing her. She made headlines when she came to her boyfriend's defense. And so, I think she's dealt with her share, given that she's got more than 400 million people who follow her, of criticism. And so she's trying to strike that balance. I think we all are. Jill, I aspire to be able to keep running Mo News and take a 4-year break from posting.
Most your team will do it.
There you go.
And finally, from the French newspaper Le Figaro, see, those Babel lessons are paying off. The most famous painting in the world looks like it's going to get its own room. French authorities at the Louvre say that the Mona Lisa may be moved to an underground chamber. Right now, it shares a room with other paintings, and there is often a huge crowd and long lines. An official says, we don't welcome visitors very well in this room, so we feel we're not doing our job properly. Moving the Mona Lisa to a separate room could put an end to public disappointment. The Louvre receives 9 million visitors every year, and according to museum officials, the Mona Lisa is the main attraction for about 80% of those people. And during especially busy days, about 250,000 people stand in line just to see it.
Yeah. So Mona Lisa about to get her own room. By the way, the value of the Mona Lisa, they value at $830 million. So I feel like the painting deserves its own space now. So these proposed upgrades would create 2 entry points, a special room, underground room for the Mona Lisa. The renovation budget, apparently $500 million for this. So they have to figure out if the French government has enough money to do this, but also given how much tourism revenue the Mona Lisa brings in, they think it might be worth it here. They just moved the Mona Lisa. They did a whole bunch of renovations in recent years, but already they're looking to make further improvements. Joe, smaller than I expected. I don't know. I kind of felt wah-wah. But by the way, the thing about the Mona Lisa, I mean, I'm not here to diminish, the great artwork. I think there's a lot of great art out there. But the thing about the Mona Lisa is it actually wasn't famous until it was stolen 100 years ago. And the fact that it was missing for a while is what has led to this sort of cachet for the Mona Lisa.
Yeah, I feel like the Mona Lisa is like famous for being famous,
Yeah. Yeah.
But give the girl her own room. She deserves it.
The first reality, she deserves her own room. And so do the millions of tourists who come to Paris to see the Mona Lisa every year. All right, we end here with On This Day in History. On this day in 1945, Eva Braun and Adolf Hitler get married hours before they both commit suicide. Braun met Hitler while she was employed as an assistant to Hitler's photographer. A lot of speculation, a lot of mystery around this death, the fact that they got married that night and then took their own lives. Of course, a lot of conspiracy theories and series of like where they're actually buried. The Soviets got to them first, and that led to a lot of mystery here. They didn't want to create a memorial site for Hitler. So they burnt his remains and her remains and then spread the ashes around. So there's all these theories out there. But if you go back to the history here, back to the Russian archives where it finally opened up after the end of the Cold War, it's pretty clear that Hitler didn't go and live on somewhere in South America. All right, fast forward to 1992. On this day in history, riots erupted in LA after police officers were acquitted in the trial of the beating of Rodney King. That's where 4 LAPD officers had been caught beating an unarmed black driver. They're acquitted for the beating of Rodney King. Hours after the verdicts are announced, outrage and protest spread across LA, looting, rioting, more than 100 fires. And you got a sense, Jill, as we've talked about the OJ verdict in recent weeks with the death of OJ, the racial divide that was happening there, and just the racism that we were seeing there from the LAPD leading up to those riots. So, all right, some lighter items here. On this date in 2011, Prince William married Kate Middleton in a lavish ceremony. Many of you probably watched it. About 2,000 guests, 1 million spectators lined the streets of London. 2 billion people are estimated to have watched the wedding around the world. And we end here with a bit of music history. Jill, on this date in 1976, a 26-year-old singer named Bruce Springsteen played a concert in Memphis for his Born to Run tour. He then tried to climb the fence. Bruce Springsteen, young Bruce, tried to climb the fence at Graceland to try to meet Elvis Presley. He was escorted off the premises by guards who informed him Elvis is not at home, and you can't just do that, young Bruce Springsteen.
And I love him even more, Moshe. All right, Moshe, we want to thank everyone for listening to the Mo News podcast. If you like what you hear, please share this with your friends. It will help us grow. Follow us and subscribe so you don't miss an episode, and review us in the App Store.
Jill, it's good to have you back. Look forward to another week of news here. Safe travels back to New York. And I should note we have some exciting things happening this week. It's the 1-year anniversary of Mo News Premium, so look out for all that.
Tramps like us, baby, we were born to run. Bye, everybody. Have a great day.